Well, today on Plant Life Project, I want to talk about the aquarium substrate, which is a popular topic for a lot of videos out there. And most videos are going to talk about which is the best media to use in your tank, whether it's gravel or sand or aqua soil, dirt substrate, citing pros and cons to each. But the aquarium substrate is so much more than just a media that covers the bottom of your tank. It is a part of the aquarium ecosystem, and when it's healthy, it helps process waste and cycle nutrients for the plants. It gives life to the various bacteria, microorganisms, and of course the fish in our tanks. But it's a subject that can get overwhelming, especially if you're a beginner in this hobby and you're going in the direction of building a natural setup. So today I want to share just a substrate method that I've used in some of my tanks that is simple, allowing you to just get started at a basic beginner level. But it's a method that you can build on and improve your substrate over time as you learn more and you gain confidence to apply that knowledge. And I know for me, it has really helped me to develop a mindset that's different around substrate, seeing it more as part of the ecosystem, not just a media in the bottom of our tank. Now, as a beginner, before we even get into the aquarium substrate, it's important to have some goals set for your tank. What are you trying to achieve with your setup? For example, some goals that I have for my tank, some basic goals are, I want it to be low maintenance as much as possible, which means minimal water changes, gravel vacuuming, filter cleaning, etc. Minimal intervention from me. I also want it to be a living ecosystem as much as possible, which means nutrient cycling, natural filtration. I want there to be food sources for the fish living in the tank, so that they're not so reliant on me feeding them all the time. I want it to be low tech, minimal appliances needed to support the tank. I don't want to be so reliant on life support systems that I freak out if the power goes out or something. And of course, I want to be able to grow plants, whether it's submerged aquatic plants or riparian plants growing out of the top of my tanks. So these are just some examples, some basic goals that I have for each tank. And it gives me an ideal to work towards. They're not always perfectly achieved, but it still gives me that direction that I'm heading. So what are some of your goals? They may be different than mine, but the important thing is to have that ideal and that direction that you're heading with each tank. This is going to influence what kind of substrate media that you choose, and of course what type of substrate you're building over time. So this substrate method that I'm going to share with you today is one that I've used in this 75-gallon tank here behind me, and also in a more recent 10-gallon build. And they differ slightly, but they're both based on the same basic method. When I first set up this 75-gallon tank, I didn't have an exact vision for what I wanted it to be, other than simply achieving the goals that I mentioned earlier. And for the substrate media, I simply started with a mix of gravel and Eco-Complete, and I had some beginner aquarium plants like hornwort and frogbit, things like that, plants that feed from the water column, as well as the riparian plants like peace lily and pothos and a few others. Had some guppies and just pond snails. I had a hang on the back filter that poured into a window box planter that housed all of the riparian plants. Now as time went by, I just allowed a lot of the fish waste to accumulate. I mean, I did still gravel vacuum, but not too thoroughly. I was really trying to build up organic matter in the substrate. And then I began building up the substrate by adding another layer of Eco-Complete and gravel. And a few months later, I added a sand cap and then dirt in the form of frozen dirt cubes. Then I started planting Amazon sword, Italian val, water wisteria, all rooted plants that grow in the substrate. If you want to learn about how I made the frozen dirt cubes, I have a short video that I'll try to put a card up for. Now all of this was added to just what was already there. Like I didn't have to tear down the tank or anything like that, and just built it up over time. And now this has become a heavily planted community tank with tetras and cories, guppies, cherry barbs, autocinclus, zebra danos, and a rainbow shark. And I've redesigned the riparian plant layout a few different times. I kept wanting to try out new ideas, but now I'm trying to just leave it alone. So this tank started as a basic inert substrate. Over time it has developed into a very active, integral part of the aquarium ecosystem and is very closely achieving a lot of my goals. It is definitely low maintenance. I do a partial water change every 3 months and I do minimal fertilizing. It's been 1 year since I even fertilized the substrate plants, and I'm constantly having to remove excess plants. I do use some liquid ferts. They have been necessary for the riparian plants and the frog bit. I don't do any vacuuming. I've got a really good cleanup crew between the cories, the rainbow shark, and the snails and otocinclus. They're just constantly feeding, sifting through, feeding, and breaking down all the organic matter. And this is becoming a living ecosystem. And it's not a perfect system, of course. I do feed these fish, a few times a week, but there are plants and pond snails. I've seen copepods, biofilm, guppy fry from time to time that are a food source, some algae, but nothing unreasonable, springtails and detritus worms, and the smaller fish, especially the cherry barbs, they're just constantly grazing on the roots of the frog bit and of course down the substrate along the driftwood. And of course this is low tech. There's no CO2 system, and I've got all low tech aquarium plants. There's natural filtration going on. For several months I didn't even use the hob filter at all. All the water parameters were fine, they were consistent during that time. But I started using the hob again because there was so much buildup of mulm, along the substrate, and it was just constantly getting stirred up by the cories and the rainbow shark. So I put the filter back on, and I'm using filter floss just to manage the water clarity. And I only run it 3 or 4 days a week, and I'm always turning it off at night. I do use a heater, of course, during the winter time, and this is close to a window, so if the power goes out for a few days, I can, let the plants get natural light. Otherwise, of course, I am using aquarium lights. And as far as the goal of growing plants in this setup, I'll just say goal achieved. Now this second tank has only been set up for a few months, but I'm using a similar strategy for the substrate. This substrate media is a mixture of gravel and fluval stratum with lava rock and leca under the gravel toward the back of the tank. I have riparian plants like spider plant, photonia, and waffle plant growing out of the top, and just recently I added water wisteria, java moss, marimo moss, and frog bit, and I've only put pond snails in here so far. I have a small internal filter, mostly just for gentle water circulation. I have seen copepods and detritus worms coming out of the substrate, which is a good sign. They're going to help break down debris and organic matter, improving the soil, improving the substrate for the plants. Plus they're going to be a food source for whichever fish I end up putting in here. At some point I may end up adding a sand cap over all the substrate. I'm not sure yet. This setup is really still evolving. So this substrate method can be great for those who are wanting an ecosystem tank but may not know where to begin, or those of you who may be hesitant to use a full-on dirt substrate. This is a way that you can start with just simple ingredients like gravel, eco-complete, maybe a little aqua soil mixed in, with the mindset that you can build on and improve and diversify your substrate over time. So this gives you a way to just start simple and grow into this hobby as your tank is growing and developing. And it's not quick, it's a slow build method. I know for me, it's been very rewarding to watch these tanks grow and develop and mature, and they become more self-sufficient, lower maintenance over time. This slow build method, our tanks in a way begin their own story. They take on a life of their own as they grow and develop, meet new challenges and overcome them, which is really our story. It's yours and mine. It's part of our journey as individuals into this hobby. So this intertwining of stories between us and our tanks is one thing that really makes this hobby so fascinating. And for many of us, it truly is a godsend. It captures our imagination, it brings beauty into our lives, helps us expand our knowledge of the natural world, and can even reignite a sense of wonder that we may have lost at some point through the journey of life. Be sure to check out this playlist for the 75-gallon tanks I've talked about today and see how it has developed over time, some of the challenges I've had to face and overcome, and hopefully it will give you some insight, some ideas that you can apply to your setup as well. Well, thank you for joining me today. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll see you next time.